There's a kind of person who always feels like they don't quite belong, not because they're strange, but because they think too deeply. They sit in a room full of laughter and suddenly feel exhausted, not because anyone did something wrong, but because no one said anything real. Deep thinkers, they notice what others ignore. They hear the silence behind people's words, and because of that, they're often misunderstood. I don't know who you are, but if you're watching this, chances are you're one of them too. You were the kid who asked too many questions. You felt things no one around you seemed to feel. And somewhere, deep inside, you've wondered, is it just me? Am I the only one who thinks this way? No. You're not alone. You're one of the few minds Carl Jung described as awake in a world that is asleep. But that awakening, it's not a gift. It's a burden, a quiet war, a kind of loneliness that has no name. In this video, we'll go deep into the inner world of deep thinkers. Why do you feel so disconnected? Why do people always come to you for clarity, yet leave when you need support? And most importantly, how do you protect your truth without losing yourself in a world that prefers illusion? Let's begin. They never say it out loud, but deep thinkers often carry the quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't cry for attention, because it knows no one will truly understand it anyway. It starts early. You're sitting at the dinner table. Everyone's laughing about the weather, the news, the latest celebrity gossip. And then you carefully, cautiously say something honest, something that matters, something that comes from that aching place inside you. And suddenly, the room freezes. Someone coughs. Someone else clears their throat. A forced laugh. And then, anyway, the moment is gone. But you felt it. That tiny fracture. That subtle dismissal. That unspoken message. Don't bring your depth here. It doesn't belong. You learn quickly that real conversations make people uncomfortable. That truth doesn't always land where you hope it will. And that most people are better at smiling than feeling. Carl Jung once said, "The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the unconsciousness of society." And that's the tragedy, isn't it? Because you're not trying to be difficult. You're not being dramatic. You're simply tuned in to something deeper, something others can't quite touch. In a world that celebrates charisma over character volume, over meaning, performance over presence, the person who dares to feel becomes the outsider. It's like living in a room where everyone is wearing noise-canceling headphones, and you're the only one hearing the static underneath. That's why you hesitate now, isn't it, before you speak, before you text, before you share the thing that actually matters. Because somewhere along the way, you learned depth has a cost. And that cost is connection, or at least the illusion of it. We call them friends, but they don't know who you really are. We call it belonging, but it comes with conditions. Don't be too intense. Don't ask too many questions. Don't challenge the script, so you shrink. You smile when you're tired. You nod when you disagree. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because silence would be worse. That's not connection. That's survival. And the sad part, most people never even notice. They don't see the silent editing you perform in every conversation. The way you measure every word, not for truth, but for palatability. Because being real is risky, and being deep can feel like being invisible. So what's the lesson here? It's not that the world hates depth. It just doesn't know how to hold it. You are not broken for wanting meaning. You are not wrong for craving truth. But in a society addicted to performance, being honest is a revolutionary act. And like most revolutions, it starts with discomfort, the kind of discomfort that forces you to ask a question most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Why are we all pretending? And that question, that pull on the thread, is exactly what leads us deeper, deeper into the illusion itself. The illusion society works so hard to maintain. Let's pull that thread together in the next part, because to understand the pain of deep thinkers, we have to understand the system that taught them to hide. Why society prefers obedience over awareness. There's a system. You were born into it. Long before you had a voice, it handed you a script. Be polite. Say I'm fine, even when you're not. Follow the rules. Don't ask why, just ask how high. From the first day of school, you were taught to raise your hand, not your mind. Carl Jung called it mass-mindedness, the psychological state where the individual stops thinking for themselves and instead becomes a fragment of the collective. It's not a conspiracy. It's a coping mechanism. Society doesn't run on truth. It runs on predictability. And deep thinkers, they're anything but predictable. They question. They challenge. They disrupt the rhythm of collective numbness. And in doing so, they become a threat, not because they're violent, but because they're awake. Think about it. Have you ever felt punished, not for doing something wrong, but for thinking differently? Maybe it was in a classroom. You asked the kind of question that made the teacher uncomfortable. Maybe it was in a meeting. You voiced a concern that everyone else had, but no one dared to say out loud. Maybe it was with family. You questioned a tradition that never made sense, and suddenly you were the difficult one. That's not rebellion. That's awareness. But awareness in an unconscious system feels like betrayal. Society rewards the agreeable. It promotes the likable. It markets the easy-to-digest version of humanity, where thinking too deeply is branded as overthinking, and feeling too much is seen as a flaw. So what happens? You adapt. Not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. You learn to camouflage, to trade your curiosity for compliance, your voice for validation, your truth for silence. And the system claps. You get the grades, the job, the applause. But you lose something far more precious. Yourself. The great lie is that we are free. But most people don't live freely. They live safely, according to script, according to expectation, according to what will make others comfortable. But comfort is not the same as truth. And safety is not the same as freedom. Here's the irony. Deep thinkers are often accused of being too serious, too intense. But they're the ones asking the only questions that matter. Why do we do what we do? Who does this serve? Is this even real? They're not trying to burn it all down. They're trying to wake it up because they see the cracks. They feel the emptiness behind the noise. They hear the hunger behind the performance. And yet, when they speak up, they're dismissed. When they go quiet, they're misunderstood. When they pull away, they're judged. So what's the lesson? Mass-mindedness isn't just a cultural flaw. It's a spiritual illness, a forgetting of who we really are. And the only antidote is to remember your inner voice, your inner compass, your ability to think independently, even when the crowd marches in another direction. Because if you don't, you'll slowly become a stranger in your own life, living by rules you never questioned and carrying responsibilities that were never yours. But let's be honest, Thinking independently isn't just exhausting, it's draining. Because the moment you wake up, people start reaching for you, not to join you, but to lean on you. They come with their pain, their confusion, their chaos, and somehow it ends up in your chest. You become their mirror, their therapist, their anchor, and in the process, you begin to disappear. Why does that happen? Why do deep thinkers feel used up after every interaction? That's what we explore next. The hidden cost of being everyone's emotional anchor. You walk into a room and something already feels off. You haven't spoken. No one has cried. But your chest is already heavy. The moment someone opens up to you, they relax. They feel lighter. And somehow, you feel like you just lost a part of yourself. You don't know how or when it started, this pattern where you become the one everyone turns to, but no one really stays for. They come to vent, to confess, to unload, and then they leave, feeling better, while you feel empty. Carl Jung had a name for this phenomenon: projection. It's when someone takes the parts of themselves they can't deal with, the fear, the shame, the unresolved trauma, and without knowing it, projects it onto someone else. And deep thinkers, we're the perfect canvas. Why? Because we're calm, because we listen, because we hold space without judgment. And without realizing it, we become emotional containers for other people's chaos. You probably don't even notice when it's happening. Someone says, "I don't know why, but I feel like I can tell you everything." They pour it out. And by the end of the conversation, they're smiling, and you're wondering why your body feels 10 pounds heavier. That's emotional vampirism. And it's not always malicious. Most of the time, they don't even know they're doing it, but the effect is the same. You become a reservoir for energy that was never yours to carry. The danger isn't just exhaustion, it's identity erosion. When you're constantly absorbing the emotions of others, your own thoughts become cloudy. Your own feelings become confusing. You lose track of what's yours and what's not. You start doubting your instincts. You overthink your reactions. You feel responsible for people's moods, even when you had nothing to do with them. That's not empathy. That's enmeshment. And if you're not careful, you become so good at being someone else's safe space that you forget how to be your own. Let me give you a real example. There's a woman I know, let's call her Mia. She's the one everyone calls when they're falling apart. The dependable one. The strong one. The therapist friend. But when she went through a breakdown, when she finally reached out, there was silence. No callbacks, no long talks, just polite distance, because she wasn't serving anymore. She was needing. And the moment she needed, people vanished. That's the dark side of being the emotionally available one. People confuse your strength for endless capacity. But here's the truth. You're not a bottomless well. You're not a therapist. You're not their savior. You are a soul. And your energy is sacred. So what do? You set boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect yourself. You stop apologizing for needing space. You stop explaining your silence. You stop justifying why you can't always be available. Because the more you explain, the more you give people permission to negotiate your limits. And your limits are non-negotiable. Here's the lesson. You cannot heal others by destroying yourself. And no amount of listening, absorbing, or fixing will ever be enough for someone who refuses to heal themselves. You can hold space. You can care. But you must never carry what isn't yours. Still, even when you protect your energy, the world keeps trying to pull you back in. through noise, through distraction, through 1,000 tiny demands, especially now in a culture addicted to stimulation and speed. And that raises a deeper question. How do you stay sane in a world that never stops moving, never stops screaming, never lets you feel? To answer that, we have to talk about something that's become a lost art in modern life: solitude. Why silence isn't emptiness, but a return to your true self. You turn off your phone, close the door, and for a moment there's only silence. No voices, no notifications, no one asking for a piece of you, just you. And yet, why does that silence feel so unfamiliar, so terrifying? We've been conditioned to fear solitude, to treat being alone as a punishment, as if silence is a sign that something's wrong. But here's the truth. Most people never hear. Solitude is not loneliness. Carl Jung understood this distinction deeply. He wrote, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." Loneliness is absence. Solitude is presence. Loneliness feels like no one sees you. Solitude is when you finally see yourself. But society doesn't celebrate solitude. It pathologizes it. You're antisocial. You're too quiet. You're withdrawing. In a culture built on constant noise, a person who seeks silence is seen as suspicious. We were raised to believe that value comes from productivity, that to matter, you must do. But solitude teaches you the opposite. You don't earn your worth, you remember it. And that remembering only happens when everything else goes quiet. Think about it. Some of your most important realizations didn't come when you were surrounded by people. They came when you were walking alone, sitting with a book, staring out the window, lying awake at 2 a.m., wondering what the hell any of this means. Because when the world goes silent, your soul starts speaking. There's a reason the great sages, artists, and thinkers retreated into solitude. Jesus went into the desert. Nietzsche walked the mountains. Virginia Woolf wrote alone in a room of her own. They weren't running away. They were returning to the self, not the self society told them to be, but the one they had to remember. In Eastern traditions, solitude is sacred. Zen monks sit in stillness for hours, not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. Meanwhile, in the West, we call that doing nothing. We call it wasting time. We scroll, we swipe, we distract, anything but sit still with ourselves. Because if we do, we might feel it, the ache, the grief, the questions, the parts we've buried beneath productivity and performance. But here's the paradox. That ache, that's not a flaw. That's a doorway. Solitude isn't a void. It's a mirror. And only in front of that mirror can you finally ask, what parts of me have I abandoned just to be accepted? So what's the lesson? If you're a deep thinker, you don't just need solitude. You thrive in it. It's your recharge, your compass, your sanctuary. And the more you embrace it, the less you chase false connections. The less you beg to be understood by people who were never meant to see you. You stop editing yourself. You stop auditioning. You start coming home. Still, solitude isn't the destination. It's the preparation. Because once you've come home to yourself, a new question emerges. What? Now, what are you meant to do with this awareness, this depth, this truth? Carl Jung believed that self-knowledge wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a task, a psychological destiny. So let's go there next. Let's be honest, being a deep thinker doesn't make life easier. It makes it harder because you don't get to pretend. You don't get to lie to yourself. You don't get to numb what you know is real. You walk through life seeing the cracks in the foundation, feeling what others deny, hearing what's never said. And that awareness, it's not a party trick. It's a burden, a responsibility, a calling. Carl Jung believed that every conscious individual carries a task within them, a psychological destiny. Not everyone is meant to confront it. Most people will spend their lives avoiding it, choosing comfort over confrontation, noise over truth, approval over authenticity. But you were born to go inward, to face the fire, to walk through the shadow and come out with light. You're not here to fit in. You're here to wake people up. That doesn't mean preaching, or saving, or performing some grand gesture. It means being so deeply yourself that your very presence becomes a mirror, a reminder that something is missing, that something is real, that something is worth remembering. Look around you. The world is flooded with content, opinions, performances, noise. But very few voices make people stop and feel. That's what deep thinkers do. Not because they want to, but because they can't help it. They speak the thing no one wants to say. They ask the question that disrupts the script. They carry the kind of truth that makes people uncomfortable because it shakes them awake. Of course, it comes at a cost. You'll lose people. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be told you're too much. But hear this, you are not too much. You are exactly what this world has forgotten how to hold. And in time, the right people will recognize that. The ones who crave depth, who think in metaphors, who seek meaning before validation. They'll find you, but only if you stop hiding. Here's the lesson. You weren't meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be true. And when you commit to your truth, even when it isolates you, even when it scares you, you create space for others to do the same. That's how the world changes, not through force, but through frequency, not through followers, but through alignment. So if you're still asking, is it worth it? Is it worth carrying this awareness, this depth, this weight? The answer is yes, because in a world asleep, being awake is the most rebellious thing you can be. And you were born to rebel, not with noise, but with presence, not with outrage, but with clarity, not by becoming louder, but by becoming truer. So stop shrinking, stop apologizing, stop asking for permission to exist as you are. The world may not understand you yet, but the future needs you fully awake. And if you're still here, if you're still watching, that means you've already started. Stay awake. If this video spoke to you, if it echoed something you've always felt but never had words for, then let's keep this space alive. Comment with one word that describes how you truly feel right now. I read every single one. Subscribe for more content like this, because here, you'll never have to apologize for your mind. And if this brought you value, consider sharing it with someone who thinks like you. Because the world may overlook deep thinkers, but in time, they'll realize we were the ones trying to save it. Silently, lovingly, relentlessly.